There's a very specific type of person out there. The kinder they are to everyone else, the harsher they are to themselves. They're always the one picking up the phone at 11 p.m., always staying late to help a coworker, always the first to say it's okay when someone else messes up, but there's something nobody ever sees. When they're alone, everything changes. The voice inside their head isn't soft anymore. It turns cold. You're so useless. You always ruin everything. Nobody actually needs you here. The scary part isn't that those thoughts show up. It's that they believe every single word, and here's the thing, they would never say any of that to another person, no matter how badly that person screwed up. Maybe you know someone like this, or maybe that someone is you. This isn't about personality. This is a psychological mechanism running quietly in the background of your brain. And today, Apex is going to break it all the way down. Let's start with one fact. You are not alone in this. Self-hatred isn't some rare condition. The data shows that far more people are living with this than you'd think. A large-scale survey found that 86% of young adults between 18 and 34 carry a deep sense of dissatisfaction with their own abilities, their appearance, and their achievements. Most of us have felt it at some point, that crushing feeling of being inadequate, not good enough, or just not smart enough. And there's a reason for that. The human brain has a built-in flaw, a negativity bias. It's literally wired to hold on to and amplify negative thoughts about yourself much more powerfully than any compliment ever could. But is this self-hatred actually accurate? No. And nothing proves that more clearly than when we evaluate ourselves without knowing it's us. In 2013, a study asked participants to rate how appealing different audio recordings sounded. What they didn't know was that the researchers had secretly mixed in recordings of their own voices. The result, most people rated their own voice as more appealing than the others. That experiment reveals something uncomfortable, but also kind of comforting. A lot of the things you hate about yourself, your looks, your personality, they're not actually that bad. You only started hating them the moment you realized they belong to you. We're so open to appreciating other people, but we build this brutal wall that keeps us from ever doing the same for ourselves. So, why does the brain work this way? To answer that, let's look at a study on how people adjust to major life experiences. Researchers tracked 3 groups. One group that won the lottery, one group that had been in serious accidents, and a control group of people living ordinary lives. The control group was the baseline. If you think the lottery winners stayed significantly happier than that baseline, the results are pretty disappointing. After a while, their happiness dropped right back down to the same level as everyone else. This is called the hedonic treadmill. When a big surge of joy becomes routine, it fades, and people even lose their ability to enjoy the small pleasures they used to have. On the flip side, when researchers compared the accident survivors to the control group, the gap was much harder to close. Pain tends to stick. It digs in deeper and lasts much longer than joy. The survivors spent a long time struggling, replaying what happened, and comparing their present lives to everything they had lost. So why does the brain treat these two types of experiences so unfairly? It goes back to our evolutionary roots. For our ancestors, detecting danger always came before enjoying pleasure. Picture yourself as a prehistoric human. You spot a bush full of ripe berries right in front of you, but then you hear rustling in the trees nearby. Miss the berries? You go hungry for a few more hours. Ignore that rustling. You become something's dinner. To keep you alive, your brain had to hardwire a red alert response to anything threatening. And that defense mechanism is still running in our heads today. You can test this yourself with something totally familiar. What sticks with you longer? A compliment from your boss, or one random negative comment someone left online. For most of us, a single scratch of criticism drowns out a dozen pieces of praise. And this leads to one of the most primal human fears: rejection. Back then, people needed their group to survive. Being cut off from the community was basically a death sentence. That's why the brain craves belonging, so desperately to avoid being cast out. It pushes you to constantly reshape yourself to fit what other people expect. Mix that with a brain already wired to zoom in on the negative, and it's no wonder we end up becoming our own harshest critics. But evolution is only half the story, because alongside our biology, we're also deeply shaped by the culture we grow up in. In modern society, especially in environments that put a heavy emphasis on achievement, one mindset gets installed early. Recognition, love, and personal worth are things you have to earn. Psychologists call this conditional positive regard. The idea is that you're not loved just for existing. You're loved because you met a certain standard. Think about a situation a lot of us have lived through. A kid brings home a test with an A on it. Instead of straightforward praise, the first response from the adult is, "Why didn't you get an A plus? Where did you go wrong?" Or maybe a child only gets praised when they're quiet and agreeable, but gets ignored or criticized the moment they show anger or exhaustion. And what's really concerning is that the child almost always turns that pain inward. At a young age, the brain doesn't have enough life experience to reason through it objectively. Mom and dad are being hard on me today because they're stressed about work or money. A child can't process those kinds of adult complexities. So they land on the simplest, most direct conclusion they can. I'm being treated this way because I'm not good enough. My worth depends on being perfect. Growing up with that core belief, we carry that whole set of conditional rules with us straight into adulthood. It becomes a mental filter that automatically turns ordinary failures at work or in relationships into personal evidence, confirming that something is fundamentally wrong with us. That way of thinking doesn't fade with time. It just quietly takes deeper root and becomes an automatic judgment habit we apply to ourselves every single day. And this is where things get even more concerning. Over time, this creates a split inside your mind. Instead of living as one unified person, you're actually quietly maintaining different versions of yourself in your head. You're constantly caught between three of them at once. The first is your actual self, who you are right now with all your normal habits, your flaws, your tired days, your imperfections. The second is your ideal self, the version you dream of becoming, smarter, more successful, more composed. This is the personal destination you've set for yourself. And the third one, the real source of all that pressure, is your ought self, the version you believe you are required to be so that society won't reject you. This version is always cheerful, always performs perfectly, never says the wrong thing, and always knows how to make everyone around them happy. Picture a real situation. You're at work and you are completely burned out. Your actual self just wants to say no to everything and rest. But your ought self immediately steps in and forces you to smile and take on your coworker's workload too, with that familiar line, "Oh, don't worry about it, I've got it." The psychological pain doesn't come from having flaws. It comes from being constantly stretched between these versions of yourself, straining to reach the ideal while also carrying the crushing weight of the ought just to feel like you deserve to be loved. In behavioral psychology, this state of exhausting internal conflict has an official name. Self-disc or self feels so enormous, your brain keeps firing off failure warnings. As a result, you drain every bit of your energy performing the ought self version in public. You come across as patient, generous, and incredibly kind to your friends and coworkers. So why is it so easy to extend that grace to other people? The answer is an information gap. You can forgive a coworker easily because you only see the surface of what happened. You can't read the selfish or lazy thoughts running through their head. But with yourself, you hold the complete file, every mistake, every embarrassing moment from the past, all the way to right now. Knowing every single corner of your own story turns you into the most ruthless judge you'll ever face. But when the door closes and there's no one around, the exhaustion hits. The self-loathing surfaces because your actual self couldn't just naturally be perfect, which meant you had to perform every single day. That cruelty, those whispered judgments in the dark, they're actually, paradoxically, how your brain releases pressure after a long day of holding up that fake, flawless exterior. Understanding the root cause is the first step, but it's not enough. If you go online looking for solutions, the most common advice you'll find is love yourself more. That advice isn't wrong, but it's hollow. It's like telling someone who can't swim to just feel confident and jump in. What we need are concrete, physical, logical actions to reprogram our nervous system. Here are 3 practical psychology methods you can start using right now. Method 1, change the pronoun in your thoughts. The biggest mistake you make when you mess something up is letting the self-criticism happen in the first person. You're playing both roles at once. The one getting yelled at and the one doing the yelling. When you say the wrong thing in a conversation or you drop the ball on something at work, an automatic voice fires up instantly. "I'm so terrible. I ruined everything again." When you use the word I, your brain automatically fuses your entire self-worth with that one mistake. You lose all objectivity because you're standing inside the storm of negative emotion. To break that fusion, you need to use a technique called pronoun shifting. The moment you catch that critical voice starting up, force yourself to pause for 3 seconds and switch the sentence to second or third person, like you're watching someone else from the outside. Instead of thinking, "I'm so stupid," shift it to, "You're feeling insecure because of that mistake." Or, "She's beating herself up over one thing she said." That simple language shift creates necessary psychological distance. It pulls you out of the emotional quicksand and puts you in the position of an outside observer. From there, ask yourself one logical question. If a close friend of mine made the exact same mistake, what would I say to them? You would never look your friend in the face and say, "You're useless. You always destroy everything." You'd analyze the situation with compassion. That was a small mistake. Everyone slips up at work sometimes. Just fix it and move on. Use that same standard, that same clear and generous language you give to everyone else, and read it back to yourself. You don't have to force yourself to feel love for yourself right away. You just need to borrow the objectivity you already hand out freely to the world and apply it to your own actual self. Method 2, the 5-second silence rule when receiving a compliment. People who tend towards self-hatred usually have one very dangerous automatic reflex. They reject every piece of positive information about themselves. When someone says, "Your presentation slides looked amazing today," your brain immediately feels uncomfortable and restless. That discomfort shows up because the compliment doesn't match the negative image you've assigned to yourself in your head. To eliminate that conflict, you unconsciously find ways to shrink your own value with deflections like, "Oh, it was nothing. I just got lucky." Or, "That was easy. Anyone could have done it." That habit of rejecting compliments quietly reinforces your brain's false belief that you genuinely have nothing to offer. To reverse that process, you have to practice receiving positive data without running it through a filter first. Next time anyone compliments you on your appearance, your work, or your character, activate the 5-second silence rule. Lock down the reflex to explain it away or minimize yourself. Look them in the eye, smile, and say exactly 2 words. "Thank you." Once you've said it, the real challenge begins. Force yourself to sit still, stay quiet, and just sit with the uncomfortable feeling inside for a full 5 seconds. In those 5 seconds, your body might react. You might feel embarrassed, feel like you don't deserve it, feel the urge to say something to soften the weight of the compliment. Let those feelings be there. Your only job is to act like someone who is simply receiving information. Actively allowing yourself to receive without pushing it away will slowly expand the safe zone in your mind. You're sending a new signal to your nervous system. You are completely allowed to be recognized without needing to be flawless first. Method 3. Reframe selfish as energy maintenance. The biggest psychological barrier keeping you from treating yourself well is an invisible fear. You're afraid that if you stop being harsh, if you stop punishing yourself, you'll become selfish, lazy, and no longer a good person in anyone's eyes. You unconsciously believe that cruelty toward yourself is the only thing keeping you from falling apart. This is a serious logical error when it comes to energy. Think about your body and mind in the most basic physical terms. The law of conservation of energy, your endurance, your patience, your emotional capacity, these are limited resources. They are not a bottomless well you can keep drawing from without limit. Every day when you go out into the world and perform the ought-self version of yourself, always smiling, always helping, always absorbing pressure to keep everyone around you happy, you are burning through an enormous amount of energy. If by the end of the day, when you finally get back to your room, instead of recovering, you spend the little energy you have left tearing yourself apart with criticism and self-attack, you are pushing your nervous system into complete burnout. Think about it with this simple logic. You can't charge someone else's phone when your own is sitting at 1%. A car that never gets maintained, never gets refueled, will eventually break down in the middle of the road, no matter how much the driver wants to take the passengers somewhere far. When you neglect yourself, when you stay chronically stressed, when you lose sleep and let frustration pile up inside, you lose the capacity to manage your own behavior. You start snapping at the people closest to you. You lose focus at work. You no longer have the clarity to actually help anyone. So stopping the negative self-talk and taking time to take care of yourself is not selfish. From a behavioral science standpoint, it is a required maintenance activity to keep your system functioning. Treating yourself well isn't about pulling away from the world. It's about making sure you always have enough clean energy to keep showing up, keep contributing, and keep being genuinely kind to others in a way that actually lasts. You are the first person responsible for keeping your own tank full. Letting go of self-hatred isn't something that happens overnight. The neural pathways in your brain have been carved deep over decades of evolution and growing up. Your brain will always want to go back to the old route because it feels like a false sense of safety. But the most important thing to take with you after watching this is the truth about standards. You don't need to fix your personality. You don't need to become a perfect, flawless version of yourself before you're allowed to have peace. The only thing you need is one simple cognitive shift. End the double standard. Apply the exact same level of respect, compassion, and understanding that you generously give to everyone else and turn it back toward yourself. You'll realize just how unreasonable the punishments you've been handing to yourself actually were all along. And once the logic behind self-punishment breaks down, it starts to disappear on its own without you having to fight it. Have you ever caught yourself being way too hard on yourself? And what real practical thing did you do to stop that spiral? Share your experience in the comments. The specific thing you did might be exactly the answer someone out there is desperately looking for. Thank you for spending this time with Apex. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe so we can keep exploring the fascinating ways the mind works in future videos.